Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The first system to go silent was Valoran Expanse. No one noticed at first. Valoran space sat along the quiet edge of Coalition territory, a region known more for its research enclaves and slow-burning stars than for strategic importance. Its people, the Valorans, were methodical and patient, a species that measured time in centuries and spoke in carefully layered harmonics. Their last transmission arrived as scheduled. Routine, predictable, normal, then nothing. At first, the Coalition assumed a relay failure. Hyperspace nodes occasionally drifted out of alignment. It happened. A maintenance fleet was dispatched. They found emptiness, not destruction, not debris, not radiation signatures from battle, just absence. 3 inhabited planets, gone. Their star dimmed, as if something had taken a piece of it and left the rest struggling to remember how to burn. The maintenance fleet recorded everything, transmitted their findings, and then their signal cut mid-sentence. The scream had not begun yet. Within weeks, similar reports emerged. The Keras spiral lost 2 systems overnight. The Juno cluster reported gravitational anomalies so severe that planets slipped from orbit like beads off a broken string. Coalition analysts compiled the data. At first, they sought patterns, solar flares, dark matter fluctuations, unknown natural phenomena. But the models failed because whatever was happening was moving, and it was accelerating. The first survivors came from the outer colonies of the Thessari Union. Their ships arrived in fragments, hulls warped, systems fried, crews barely coherent. Medical teams struggled to stabilize them, but physical injuries were not the real problem. It was what they had seen. It wasn't a fleet. One survivor kept repeating. There were no ships. Another described shadows that stretched across space, bending light until stars appeared in the wrong places. A third, an experienced commander, refused to speak at all. He simply transmitted sensor logs before collapsing. The logs were worse than the testimony. Coalition scientists replayed them again and again, hoping each time for a different outcome. Space itself seemed to fold. Coordinates lost meaning. Distances collapsed. Entire regions of scanned space returned no values, not empty but undefined. One analyst summarized it in a single line. It's not destroying matter. It's removing the rules that allow matter to exist. No one wanted to believe that. The Coalition assembled its first response fleet near the Orion Gate, a major hyperspace junction connecting dozens of core worlds. If the phenomenon or enemy was moving inward, it would pass through there. It had to. The fleet was massive. Hundreds of warships from dozens of species, each bringing their most advanced technology. The Orcs deployed gravitational lances capable of crushing moons. The SciFi contributed antimatter wave cannons that could sterilize entire systems. The Vorn added temporal disruptors, experimental devices that could fracture causality itself. For the first time since the Coalition's founding, every major power stood together in one place, waiting, watching, hoping. The enemy arrived without warning. No hyperspace signature, no detectable approach. One moment, Orion Gate was stable. The next, it wasn't. Stars elongated into streaks. Space rippled like disturbed water. Sensors overloaded, then contradicted each other, then failed completely. And then, ships began to vanish. Not explode, not break apart, just disappear. Entire cruisers blinked out of existence mid-maneuver. One moment they were there, transmitting status updates. The next, nothing. No wreckage. No energy spike, just silence. Panic spread instantly. Maintain formation. Target the distortion field. Fire at will. Weapons lit up the darkness. Beams of pure energy carved through space. Antimatter detonations bloomed like artificial suns. Gravitational weapons twisted the battlefield into impossible shapes. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed to work. The distortions recoiled. The rippling slowed. Hope flickered. Then the enemy adapted. The next wave of distortions did not meet the attacks. They passed through them. Weapons that could shatter planets, simply ceased to interact, and then the fleet began to die. Faster, the final transmission from Orion Gate did not come from an admiral or flagship. It came from a damaged communications buoy drifting at the edge of the system. Its message bypassed all encryption protocols, overriding priority channels across the entire coalition network. It was not formatted, not structured, not even translated properly. It was raw emotion forced into signal form. We're losing. The message repeated, fracturing across languages, across frequencies, across thought patterns. We're losing. It spread faster than any official report, faster than any command directive, from the core worlds to the outer colonies, from ancient empires to newly spacefaring species. The message echoed, we're losing the war. And for the first time in its history, the Galactic Coalition believed it. Emergency councils convened. World leaders, military strategists, scientists, all gathered in overlapping conferences that spanned light years through quantum link communication. The question was no longer what is happening. It was how do we survive? Options were proposed. Evacuation of core systems. Deployment of experimental weapons that had never been tested. Even the unthinkable. Collapsing hyperspace routes to isolate the spread. Sacrificing entire regions to buy time. None of it felt like enough. Because the enemy was not just advancing. It was accelerating. Every projection ended the same way. Total loss. It was a junior analyst from a minor species who said it first. Quietly, hesitantly, there is one more option. The chamber barely acknowledged them. Speak. A senior commander said, more out of obligation than interest. The analyst hesitated, then continued. There is a species on the edge of coalition space. They are not fully integrated. Their technology is unconventional. A murmur spread. Name them. The analyst took a breath. Humans. The reaction was immediate. Ridiculous. They are barely advanced. They are unstable. They fight among themselves. All true. Humanity had joined the galactic stage late. They had no grand empire, no ancient wisdom, no unified culture. They were divided, unpredictable, and, by coalition standards, primitive. But the analyst continued. They have one consistent historical pattern. And that is, the commander asked impatiently. The analyst looked up. They do not stop fighting. Silence. They lose battles. They suffer catastrophic losses. By all projections, they should collapse. A pause. They don't. The chamber grew quieter. They adapt. They escalate. They redefine the conditions of conflict itself. The analysts swallowed, and they have never faced a war they chose to abandon. The words hung in the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, reluctantly, the question emerged. Do we have any other options? No one answered, because there weren't any. The transmission to Earth was prepared with unusual care, not because humanity required it, but because the coalition did. Pride had to be set aside, assumptions discarded. The message was simple, direct, honest. We are losing the war. A pause. Then, we request your assistance. The signal was sent. It crossed the void, traveling through hyperspace relays until it reached a small, unremarkable system orbiting a yellow star, a world called Earth. For several minutes, there was no response. Coalition observers watched, waited, analyzed every possible outcome. Then, at last, a reply, short, unadorned, almost casual, acknowledged, and with that single word, everything changed. The first indication that humanity had acted did not come from a fleet. It came from a disturbance near the outer defensive perimeter of the Orion Gate. What remained of it? Coalition sensors detected a brief, localized anomaly, not the violent, reality-tearing distortion associated with the enemy, but something controlled, precise. It lasted less than a second. Then a ship appeared. At first, no one realized what they were looking at. Coalition vessels, scattered and damaged from the earlier engagement, immediately redirected their sensors toward the anomaly's origin point. Automated threat systems flagged the object as unknown, while command crews scrambled to classify it. It's not one of ours. Not any known design. Energy signature minimal. Could be a probe? The object drifted in silence, its dark hull almost blending into the background of space. It emitted no visible radiation plume, no obvious propulsion signature. If not for the distortion that had preceded it, it might have gone unnoticed entirely. Then it transmitted a simple identification ping, broadcast on standard coalition frequencies. Human origin. That was when confusion turned into disbelief. The nearest coalition command ship, a heavily damaged cruiser from the Thessari Union. Open a direct channel. This is coalition command. Identify your vessel and fleet designation. There was a brief pause before the reply came through. Clear, steady, and unmistakably human. Unregistered by your standards. Single deployment unit. The Thessari commander frowned, their crest flattening in irritation. Clarify. Where's the rest of your fleet? Another pause. There is no fleet. The bridge fell silent. Around them, other ships began to tune into the exchange, their crews listening with growing unease. No fleet? The commander repeated. You were informed of the scale of the threat. Affirmative. And you sent one ship? Yes. The transmission carried no defensiveness, no arrogance, just a statement of fact. The commander struggled to process it. You misunderstand. The enemy has destroyed entire armadas. We require. This is sufficient. The interruption was calm, absolute, and somehow that made it worse. Word spread quickly across the remaining coalition forces. Humanity had responded with a single ship. Reactions ranged from disbelief to anger to quiet despair. This is a misunderstanding, one Eric strategist insisted. A forward scout, perhaps. The main fleet will follow. No hyperspace wake signatures, another replied. No reinforcements inbound. They sent a token, someone muttered bitterly. They sent a mistake. In the shadow of annihilation, hope had been fragile. Now it was cracking. Coalition sensors turned their full attention to the human vessel. Every available scan, every analytical model, every predictive algorithm was brought to bear. What they found made even less sense. The ship was small, not a fighter. Larger than that, but far smaller than even the coalition's lightest cruisers. Its structure was compact, efficient, almost austere. There were no external weapon arrays, no glowing energy conduits, no visible shielding systems. Its hull absorbed most incoming scans, returning incomplete data. What material is that? A Sci-Fi engineer asked. Unknown, came the reply. It's not reflecting energy correctly. Not reflecting? Not interacting. At least, not in ways we understand. Internally, the readings were just as strange. Power output, moderate. Thermal signature, low. Weapon systems, indeterminate. One analyst summarized the collective confusion. It looks like a vessel that should not survive even a minor engagement. And yet, another added quietly, they sent it alone. The human ship moved, not dramatically, not with the aggressive acceleration typical of military vessels preparing for combat. It simply adjusted its position, sliding through space with smooth, almost effortless motion, as if inertia were a suggestion rather than a law. Coalition tracking systems struggled to predict its trajectory. It's not using conventional propulsion. Then how is it moving? No detectable thrust vectors. Is it manipulating gravity? If it is, it's doing so with zero measurable output. The ship came to a stop at the forward edge of the defensive line, the place where the last battle had collapsed, where the enemy had last been seen. Time passed. Minutes stretched into an hour. The coalition waited. Some ships began quiet preparation for retreat, calculating escape vectors, prioritizing evacuation routes. Others powered up weapons, determined to make a final stand. And at the center of it all, the human ship remained still, watching. Then the sensors screamed. Distortion detected. Multiple vectors. It's here! Space twisted, not gradually, not with warning. One moment, the stars were fixed in their distant patterns. The next they bent. Light curved into impossible arcs. Distances compressed and expanded simultaneously. Entire sections of space seemed to overlap, as if reality itself were being folded incorrectly. The enemy had returned, and it was larger, Coalition ships reacted instantly. Orders flooded communication channels. All units, engage. Target the distortion front. Do not allow it to breach the inner line. Weapons fired. The darkness erupted into light as beams, pulses, and detonations streaked toward the approaching anomaly. The combined firepower of dozens of civilizations converged on a single, shifting region of space. For a brief moment, the advance seemed to slow. The distortions rippled under the assault, their edges fluctuating as if destabilized. Direct hits. It's working. Hope surged, then vanished. The distortions surged forward, faster than before. Stronger. Weapons that had struck moments earlier now passed through it without effect, as though the target had ceased to occupy the same reality. Adjust frequencies. Compensate for phase shift. It's not responding. Ships at the front line began to disappear. One by one, a Vorn battleship vanished mid-broadcast, its final words cut off in a burst of static. An Orcs dreadnought attempted to retreat, only to blink out of existence before it could complete the maneuver. Panic spread. Fall back. Regroup at secondary line. It's breaking through. The scream of the galaxy began again. And still, the human ship did nothing. It did not fire. It did not retreat. It did not even raise any visible defenses. It simply remained in place, silent, watching the impossible unfold. On the Thessari command ship, the commander stared at the tactical display in growing horror. Why aren't they moving? They demanded. Why aren't they doing anything? No one had an answer. The human vessel sat directly in the path of the advancing distortion, seconds away from being consumed. Open a channel, the commander snapped. Tell them to retreat. They cannot survive this. The channel opened. The message was sent. There was a brief delay. Then the human response came through. Calm, unhurried, negative. The commander's crest flared in disbelief. Negative? You will be destroyed. A pause. Then, unlikely. The distortion surged forward. Closer, closer. Reality warped violently around the human ship. Sensor readings collapsed into contradictions. Space itself seemed to unravel at the edges of perception. Coalition vessels began pulling back in desperation, abandoning the forward line entirely. All except one, the human ship. Still, silent, waiting. And then it moved. For a fraction of a second, too brief for most organic minds to register, the battlefield held its breath. The distortion surged forward, a tide of unmaking that had erased fleets, civilizations, entire star systems. It stretched toward the lone human vessel like a closing hand, and the ship moved. Not fast, not dramatically. It didn't dodge or accelerate or attempt to escape. It simply shifted, a small adjustment in position, a subtle realignment, as though it were correcting for drift rather than confronting annihilation. Coalition sensors struggled to follow. It didn't accelerate. No propulsion signature. It just relocated. The ship came to a stop again, now slightly off axis from its previous position. And then something changed. At first, it was barely detectable. A fluctuation so small that most systems filtered it out as noise. A ripple, not in space as a coalition understood it, but beneath it. A Thessari science officer leaned forward, their secondary vision membranes flickering rapidly. Wait, isolate that signal. What signal? That there, around the human vessel. Enhanced sensors locked on. The data came in fragmented, incomplete, and impossible. It's not energy, the officer whispered. Then what is it? A pause. Then, slowly, it's subtraction. The ripple expanded, not outward like an explosion, not in waves or pulses. It simply extended, as though something unseen had drawn a line through reality itself. And then it appeared, a line, thin, perfectly straight, utterly absolute. It cut across the battlefield with no regard for distance, matter, or the curvature of space. It did not glow. It did not emit radiation. It did not interact with anything in any measurable way. And yet, everything it touched ceased to exist. The advancing distortion met the line. There was no explosion, no resistance, no sound. The front edge of the enemy simply vanished, not pushed back, not destroyed, removed. A section of the consuming mass disappeared so completely that even its absence felt wrong, as the space itself hadn't finished updating to account for what was no longer there. Coalition sensors froze. Data streams filled with null values, undefined variables, recursive errors. "What just happened?" someone whispered. No one answered, because no one understood. The line continued, unstoppable, unchanging. It passed through the distortion, carving a path of absolute nothingness. Entire segments of the enemy were erased in an instant, leaving behind gaps that did not behave like empty space. Stars beyond the line flickered, their light momentarily interrupted, not by obstruction, but by something more fundamental. It was as if a piece of reality had been cleanly cut away. On the Thessari Union command ship, silence gripped the bridge. The tactical display struggled to render what was happening. The enemy mass, once a continuous, shifting anomaly, now appeared fragmented. Sections missing, boundaries unstable. "It's damaging it," an officer said, disbelief thick in their voice. "Not damaging," the science officer corrected faintly. "There's nothing left to damage." The human ship moved again. Another small adjustment, another alignment. The ripple returned. This time, coalition sensors were ready, if only confirm what they feared. "It's happening again." The second line appeared, perpendicular to the first. Where it crossed, another vast portion of the enemy vanished. Clean, instant, final. Panic turned to something else. Not hope, not yet, but something close. The enemy reacted. For the first time since its arrival, the distortion changed behavior in a way that suggested awareness. It recoiled, not in retreat, but in avoidance. Sections of the mass shifted, pulling away from the lines, attempting to flow around them. "It's adapting," a Vorn tactician warned. "Of course it is," the Thessari commander muttered. "Everything else has." But the human ship was already moving, not chasing, not reacting, anticipating. Each repositioning was minimal, almost lazy, but perfectly timed. Each new line appeared exactly where the enemy would be, not where it was. Cutting off paths, severing flows, erasing entire branches of distortion before they could fully form. Coalition observers began to realize something unsettling. The human ship was not fighting the enemy. It was solving it. "Trajectory predictions?" the commander demanded. "No pattern," the tactical officer replied. "Or rather, too many patterns. It's not following a single strategy." "Then what is it doing?" A pause. "It's optimizing." Another line. Another section gone. The battlefield began to clear, not because the enemy was being pushed back, but because it was being systematically reduced. The vast, incomprehensible mass that had consumed entire civilizations was shrinking. Coalition ships, which had been retreating moments before, now slowed, then stopped, weapons powered down, not by order, but because there was nothing left to target that their weapons could affect. All eyes turned to the lone human vessel. The enemy made one final attempt. A concentrated surge, a massive folding of space that converged directly on the human ship. The distortion thickened, intensified, as if trying to overwhelm the anomaly that threatened it. "It's targeting them directly," someone shouted. "Impacting." The count never finished. The human ship moved. One last adjustment, one final alignment. The ripple spread. And the line? No, not a line. Something larger. A plane. An infinite, perfectly flat division that extended outward in all directions from the ship's position. For a single, impossible moment, the galaxy was split, and everything on one side of that plane stopped existing. The surge vanished. The remaining fragment of the enemy collapsed, their structure destabilized beyond recovery. What had once been a vast, unstoppable force was now scattered remnants, and those remnants were retreating. Coalition sensors tracked the movement in stunned silence. "It's withdrawing," a Sci-Fi officer said quietly. "No," the Thessari commander corrected, their voice barely above a whisper. "It's fleeing." For the first time since the war began, the enemy was running. The human ship did not pursue. It did not fire again. It simply returned to stillness, as if nothing of significance had occurred. The ripples faded. The impossible lines in the plane left no trace. Only absence. The battlefield was quiet. No distortions. No collapsing space. No vanishing ships. Just a distant light of stars, steady and unchanged. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then, slowly, communications channels came back to life. Is it over? What did they do? Did anyone record that? No recording system can process it. It keeps returning null data. Across dozens of ships, across multiple species, one realization spread. Everything they understood about warfare was irrelevant. On the Orion Gate perimeter, the last remnant of the enemy slipped away into distorted space, vanishing beyond the edge of detection. The galaxy, for the first time in generations, fell silent. No screams, no alarms, no desperate transmissions. Just quiet. At the center of it all, the human ship remained, still, dark, unremarkable, as if it had done nothing at all. And that was the most terrifying part. For a long time, no one spoke. Across the shattered remains of the defensive line near the Orion Gate, coalition vessels drifted in stunned silence. Emergency crews continued their work, recovering survivors, stabilizing damaged systems. But even those routines felt distant, unreal, because the war had stopped, not ended, not won, but interrupted. And no one understood how. The first message sent to the human ship was not a demand. It was a question, carefully worded, measured, almost hesitant. This is Coalition Command. The hostile entity has withdrawn. Confirm your assessment. The reply came almost immediately. Confirmed. Nothing more. No elaboration. No analysis. Just confirmation. It was somehow more unsettling than anything else. A second message followed, less restrained. What did you do? This time, the pause was longer. Not technical. Not delayed by distance. Deliberate, as if the humans were deciding how much to say. Then, we resolved the interaction. Confusion rippled across every listening channel. Resolved? A Vorn representative echoed. You annihilated a force that has consumed half the galaxy, and you describe it as a resolution? No, the human voice replied calmly. Annihilation implies energy transfer. Force. Reaction. A brief pause. This was neither. Coalition leaders convened immediately. A secure, multi-species communication lattice formed. A shared space where the highest authorities could speak without delay. Representatives from the surviving powers appeared one by one, their forms rendered in light and abstraction. At the center of the discussion was a single, inescapable fact. Humanity had done something the galaxy could not even define. Explain your method, demanded a SciFi war strategist. In full. Another pause. Then the human voice returned. You attempted to engage the entity using conventional frameworks. That is how warfare functions. The strategist snapped. For you, the human replied. The distinction landed heavily. You perceive the entity as an opposing force, the human continued. A target, something that occupies space, exists within time, and can be acted upon. That assumption was based on all available data. A Thessari scientist interjected. Yes, the human said, and it was incorrect. Silence. The entity does not behave as matter. It does not follow energy conservation. It does not adhere to dimensional constraints in any consistent way. That much we know, the scientist said. We observed it repeatedly. You observed its effects, the human corrected, not its nature. A pause. You try to fight it as if it were in your reality. And it isn't? Someone asked. Another pause. Then, not entirely. The chamber grew colder. Not physically, conceptually. Then what is it? The Thessari commander demanded. The answer came slowly. We don't know. That sent a ripple of unease through the assembly. You don't know, the commander repeated. We have models, the human clarified, partial frameworks, approximations. And based on those approximations, you built that. The commander gestured vaguely, as if the impossible weapon might still be hanging in space. Yes, Eric's representative spoke next, their tone sharp with suspicion. You claim ignorance, yet you wield a capability that defies every known law of physics. Not defies, the human said. Extends. That is a semantic distinction. No, the human replied. It's an operational one. The coalition fell silent again, because they were beginning to understand, and they did not like it. You said we fought incorrectly. The Sci-Fi strategist said at last. Define correctly. A pause. Then, you attempted to remove the entity from reality by applying force within reality. Yes, the strategist said. That cannot work, the human interrupted gently, because the entity is not fully constrained by your reality. A long silence followed. Then, quietly, so what did you do? The answer came without hesitation. We stopped trying to affect the entity. That only deepened confusion. Then how did you? We affected the context in which the entity exists. Several coalition systems attempted to model that statement. All of them failed. Clarify, the Thessari scientist said, their voice tight. Another pause, as if the human was searching for a translation that would not break their understanding entirely. Then, you see space as a stage. Yes. You see objects as actors on that stage. Yes. You try to remove the actor. A pause. We remove the stage. No one spoke, because no one could. After several seconds, the Eric's representative finally said what everyone was thinking. That should be impossible. The human response was immediate. It was a beat until we needed it not to be. The implication settled over the chamber like a shadow. You are saying, the Sci-Fi strategist said slowly, that your weapon does not target the enemy but the space it occupies. Yes, and by removing that space, the entity has no context in which to exist. A pause, so it ceases to interact. Ceases to exist, the Thessari commander corrected. No, the human said. Another pause. Then, carefully, there is a difference between something not existing and something having nowhere to exist. That distinction lingered. Uncomfortable. Unstable. Can it return? Someone asked. The question broke the tension like glass. All attention shifted. All processing focused. Yes, the human said. No hesitation. No uncertainty. A wave of dread passed through the coalition. Under what conditions? The Sci-Fi strategist pressed. If it reestablishes a compatible interaction framework, the human replied. If it finds a way to exist within or adjacent to the regions we did not alter. In simpler terms, the Thessari scientist said, if it finds another way in... Yes. Silence again. Then this is not a victory, the Eric's representative said. No, the human agreed. It is a delay. That word hit harder than any weapon. How long? The Thessari commander asked. Another pause. This one longer than before. Unknown. The chamber dimmed slightly as several representatives withdrew partially from the shared link, overwhelmed by the implications. At last, the original question resurfaced, the one that had been waiting since the beginning. Why only one ship? The human response came quickly this time, because additional units would not increase effectiveness. That is not what we mean, the Sci-Fi strategist said. You understood the scale of the threat, the risk, the uncertainty. Yes. And you still sent a single vessel. Yes. Why? A brief pause. Then, because this was not a fleet engagement. Silence. It was a proof of concept. That answer sent a chill through every species listening. You mean, the Thessari scientist said slowly, you were testing this method? Yes. In live combat. Yes. Against an existential threat to the entire galaxy. A pause. Then, simply, yes. No one knew how to respond to that. After several seconds, the Thessari commander spoke again, more quietly now. If this was a test, what happens when you decide to deploy fully? For the first time, the human voice changed. Not in tone, not in volume, but in something harder to define. Wait, perhaps? Then we will no longer be testing. The transmission ended. Across the remains of the battlefield, the human ship powered down several of its active systems. Its faint, unreadable signature dimmed even further, until it was little more than a shadow against the stars. It did not leave. It did not celebrate. It did not communicate further. It simply remained, watching. And across the galaxy, a new realization began to spread. Not about the enemy, not about the war, but about humanity. They had not sent a fleet. They had not sent their strongest force. They had not even sent a weapon. They fully understood. They had sent a single ship to see if it would work. And it had. Somewhere, far beyond the edges of known space, the remnants of the enemy shifted, adapting, learning, searching for a way back. And for the first time, it was not the only thing doing so.